going to look awesome on my Instagram story. Thank you. I appreciate that. Freedom is defined as an individual's right to say, think, or act as he wants without restraint. We can do what we want when we want. So as a country, we have a tendency to eat whatever we want whenever we want. And I'll be the first to raise my hand and agree with the fact that every bite of fresh-baked donut that touches our lips creates a small moment of joy. But if we do this often enough, and if we do this for long enough, we find ourselves in our current situation. Where 1/3 of baby boomers are now considered officially overweight, and another third on top of that qualify as obese. Which means if our generations continue to age this way, there's a strong statistical probability that we could find ourselves entering our golden years struggling to walk up a flight of stairs, let alone trying to chase grandkids around the backyard. Instead of joining in on the fun, we're going to pull up a lawn chair and sit on the sideline to watch. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like freedom to me. We feel like we should be able to buy whatever we want whenever we want. Commercials during the morning news make it feel like you can get just about anything for $39 down and $39 a month. It's a good deal, and we like those terms, so we get that thing. And that thing, and that thing, ooh, and one of those things too, please. Pretty soon we've stacked all of these small payments on top of each other, and we find ourselves in a place where 47% of Americans don't have $400 cash to their name. Which means when an emergency expense inevitably hits, our mortgages, our utilities, our groceries, they're suddenly in jeopardy. And the stress and the anxiety that comes with that can last for months or years after the fact. Again, I don't know about you, but that does not sound like freedom to me. So it begs the question, is always doing what we want when we want actually creating freedom? My conclusion has been no. And as a result, I've become a proponent of the idea that if we can learn to live with just a little more self-control and a little more self-discipline, we're actually going to find a greater sense of personal freedom in our lives. More opportunity to pursue those things that truly matter to us. My journey in getting to this place began back when I started my first full-time job. I was reading a book, and there was one section that boiled down to say, discipline creates freedom. I know for some of you that's like hearing nails on a chalkboard, but for me, it resonated and it stuck. Admittedly, I'm maybe a little more discipline-inclined individual than others, but it got me excited and thinking, what does this mean for me? My conclusion was, this is sweet. I'm going to ride my to-do list all the way to the top. I'm disciplined. I get stuff done. I'm going to find freedom. But if we fast forward to about a year after that point, I was living in my second city in less than a year, thanks to a job relocation. I owned a brand new car for the first time in my life, and I was a newlywed. It was a big year. But that new car, it came with a payment, and for the first time in my life, ever, I was in debt. Every time I opened up my desk drawer and the coupon book was sitting there staring at me, it gave me a little bit of anxiety. I was uncomfortable with the fact that I was going to be paying my bank every month for 5 years. And when my wife and I were loving married life, we both agreed with the fact that we had a lacking sense of broader community. I had moved around so much post-graduation that we hadn't really had a sense to get rooted. We didn't feel like we had belonged someplace since we were in school. So while I was still living this disciplined life, anticipating and hoping for some great sense of freedom, I wasn't necessarily feeling it. And this is where my inner nerd kicks in. I wondered, what if I could make a chart? And on this chart, I could plot different actions. And this would help me visualize if what I'm doing is going to help me attain this freedom that I'm expecting or anticipating or hoping for. I know. Nerd alert, thank you. So the first model I came up with was based off of our standard definition of freedom, doing what we want when we want. And when I make decisions this way, I tend to use two key factors. Is this going to be fun, or is this going to be productive? I'm concerned with what I think of as the short-term sensation. What am I going to get out of this in the pretty near future? For those who are less familiar with a setup like this, you usually want to do more of what lands in the top right and start eliminating things down in the bottom left, okay? So we're all on the same page. So the first thing we'll plot on this chart is something that I have to do every month, and any of you in the room in possession of a corporate credit card are probably on the same page as me. That's reconciling those month-end expenses. Yeah, there we go. I can't stand doing this. It drives me crazy, and zero part of it seems fun, ever. You log into the bank's website, you type your description, you enter your project codes, take pictures of your receipts, convert them to PDFs, merge those into one, mail them to the bank, and blah, 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 blah. However, if I do the expense report properly and I do it on time, I stay in the good graces of the finance department. And since they won't be emailing me the following week, that's a win for productivity. So my expense report lands in the bottom right corner. The second thing we can talk through is my decision or my typical use of when or how I use social media. More often than not, it's because I want to check out. It means it's not really productive. However, the updates from friends, the memes, the videos, there's a reason we use social media, and that's because it can be fun. So that would land in the top left corner. The third decision we can talk through is my decision to get that brand new car. And this kind of applies to any big purchase that I tend to make. I think it's fun to do the comparison shopping. Thought it was fun to test drive different models that I was considering. Thought it was fun to argue with the sales guy about whether I was actually going to pay $500 for that rust protection they pre-apply to the bottom of the car, so you have to pay for it. Come on. I won that one, by the way. I also thought it was going to be a productive purchase. It got good gas mileage, had the capacity I needed to haul things around for work, and I was going to build my credit score. So making big purchases, buying new cars, lands in the top right corner. So I should do this more often? That did not add up. And the wheels on this model really started to come off as I got down to that lower left corner. This is where I started to see if I wasn't careful, things that I considered important or truly mattered to me could start to fall here. Like waking up early on a Saturday morning to go volunteer. Or in the case of my wife and I, something like making friends. I don't know what your impression is of me up to this point in the speech, but I can assure you, I value having a social life. But my wife and I kept running into the situation, and maybe you've been there too. You go to a meetup, hoping to meet new people. And the first conversation you have comes to that slow, painfully awkward, grinding halt. But it was really nice to meet you. And it would happen again, and again, and again, with seemingly every person in the room, even though we had all showed up under the pretext of being millennials. So we weren't connecting, and it didn't make sense, and it wasn't necessarily fun. And since my wife and I both work from home, it was easy for us to rationalize that we could always do more productive things with our time for work. So this is where I began to see that living solely for the short-term sensation wasn't going to help me find this freedom that I was hoping for. While hyper-productivity could be great for instant gratification, checking lots of boxes, things that I clearly considered important, like having friends, were sitting at the bottom of my to-do list. I knew that I needed to scrap this model and see what would happen if I shifted my focus from the short-term sensation to instead start thinking about the long-term implications of my actions. In this scenario, I was going to be less concerned with is it fun or is it productive. At this point, I cared most about is it freeing? Does it allow me to pursue those things that I really consider important? And is it disciplined? Am I doing what I ought to be doing when I ought to be doing it? As you can see, if we plot these same things on this chart, they land in pretty different places. My expense report gets an upgrade from the bottom right to the top right corner. It's because I want to do my job well, and there's a deadline by which it needs to be completed. So it takes some discipline to sit down at the desk and do it. Social media lands in the middle, and this is kind of a slippery slope for me. I want to share a message like this about discipline and freedom as far and as wide as possible to encourage people. And social media is a free, global platform to do that with. So it makes sense to use social media. But it is, and probably always will be, a potential distraction that will keep me from other things I should actually be doing. So I just have to be careful of when I use it. My new car got a big downgrade. A few months after I bought it, I had a radical shift in the way that I viewed debt. And I wanted to change the way that I was managing my personal finances. So it went from, yeah, get more of those, to, yeah, knock that off. And obviously, since my wife and I acknowledged the importance of friendships and community in our lives, we knew it was a priority. But we also understood and accepted that, yes, we would have to put in the time, put ourselves in that situation where you got to work through some of those awkward conversations to really start clicking with people. And this was a great step in the right direction. But I began to see there was one big hole, and you would too if I put more things on this chart. How many individual things could I rationalize as important based on their long-term implications? How many things could I think of that would make me a better employee, a better husband, a better friend, just a better human being in general? So while the first model was great at being cut and dry, it's productive or unproductive, do it, don't do it. This model ran the risk of creating a monster to-do list in the top right corner. And I knew that that would never be sustainable. So I took some more time, thought about it, processed it, and realized with 2 changes, I could publish version 3.0. And at this point, I'd find myself in a true state of nerdvana. It'd be good. The first change I would have to make would be to focus less on the individual tasks and think more about the values that they represented. Things like my community, my finances, my career. If I was thinking more frequently about the values I cared about, it could give me clarity as to whether those underlying actions should even be taken. And if I was allowing my values to more frequently weigh in on my decision-making, I was hopefully going to be able to pursue those things that truly mattered to me, which was ultimately the goal of this whole process. The second thing we have to do, or the second change we have to make, is use a little imagination. What I want you to visualize are these values kind of sliding back and forth past one another. Not that our values will continually change, but depending on the circumstances, time of day, week, month, year, some things will be more important. For example, I always want my family to be more important than my career. But just because I work from home, that doesn't mean I don't actually work. I still have to do the work. What this showed me by realizing they're going to slide past each other is that there are barriers I need to set up so I can more clearly understand what I should be doing and when I should be doing it. And with this setup, I felt like I had a really good high-level view of what I should be doing to attain this freedom that I was so excited about, which was great for me. But I realize about 0.000% of you want to go home and start plotting things on a chart. So what I want to share instead are 3 things that I think we can all do, and that I do regularly, to bring this model to life for ourselves on a daily basis. Number 1, I think the first thing we can do to bring this model to life for ourselves is take time to both define and rank our big bucket priorities. These are things like our marriages, our careers, finances, our physical health, our mental health, our faith. These are the things that we know if we just had a little more time to dive deeper down into them, we are bound to find a greater sense of personal fulfillment. And by ranking them, it can give us clarity as to how to best pursue and defend them. For example, we all have to decide whether our career or our finances are more important. They're tied together, but they're still a little different. If we choose our finances, that's great. We'll hopefully be able to pay off the things we need to pay off, or afford the things we want to afford, or give to the causes we want to give, but we might be doing work we're actually a little less crazy about. It just happens to pay really well. If we choose career, that's cool. We'll be doing work that we love day in and day out, but our paycheck might be a little smaller than if we had chosen a different career path. Neither of these answers is right or wrong. The point is, we have to take time to define this for ourselves to know how to make the best possible decisions for our lives. Number 2, I think the second thing we can all do to bring this model to life for ourselves is get better at being honest with ourselves and how we actually use our time. Once we've ranked those big bucket priorities, my experience has taught me I can only pursue about 3 or 4 of the top ones on a regular basis. So if we've sat down and we've realized, like, you know what? I'm frustrated I haven't gotten that side hustle off the ground. Or I've got some friendships that they seem like they've drifted and I don't like that. That's good to understand. But then we look at how we use our day and we realize, oh yeah, I watch Netflix for about 2 hours every night. Scroll on my phone for another 30 minutes before I go to bed. The truth is, we have the margin that we need to pursue those things that matter to us. It just takes a little more discipline to not check out at the end of the day, to stay focused on the things that we really care about. And number 3, I think the third thing we can do to bring this model to life for ourselves is get better at saying no. If getting that side hustle off the ground truly matters to us, we have to say no to watching TV for 2 hours every day. Don't get me wrong, rest is a good thing. But what I've come to realize is that pursuing these things that I care about, that's a greater good. And we don't even have to eliminate rest altogether. What if we watch TV for 30 minutes a day instead of 120? That gives us 90 minutes to work on something that we have said is important to us. With a little more self-control, we can make sure that our actions are actually backing up our words on the things that we care about. If we can do these three things, define and rank our priorities, be honest about how we currently spend our time, and start to say no to those lower ranking priorities, that's when we can start to understand what it means for discipline to create freedom. No longer will discipline simply be a means to productivity. Instead, it can be the tool that we use to defend our priorities. By doing these three things, we can start to see more clearly that always choosing to do what we want when we want may have lasting consequences well beyond that moment, creating a freedom that's merely fleeting. But by applying just a little more self-control and a little more self-discipline, we can start to more thoughtfully pursue the things that actually matter to us. And I've found that that's when we find a freedom that lasts. Thank you.